So our next speaker is Dr. Philip Leadbitter. Philip is a research fellow at the University of Southampton, so he works alongside myself and Keris in the physical sciences data infrastructure. His key focuses at the moment are on teaching and developing the training, and more recently doing sort of process recording studies in the undergraduate teaching laboratories. And Philip embarked on a program with our teaching staff in the School of Chemistry and Chemical Engineering to implement OneNote in our undergraduate laboratories, because we had sort of gone digital, but then as a weird side note of that, people were using computers but not actually taking notes. So we needed to address that. So over to you, Philip.
Thank you. Thank our colleagues at Keele sort of setting up some stuff for OneNote, because actually there's a lot in there that is very similar. Right, so I'm going to talk a little bit today about using OneNote in the undergraduate laboratories at the University of Southampton. So I think the first thing I want to do is quickly is just let people know what PSDI is, because I don't know if everybody in this chat in this call will know about who PSDI is, but it's a UK funded project through UKRI, and the idea of it was to try and support the community and bring together multiple different tools, resources, etc., to sort of better the physical sciences. And it is led through the University of Southampton and STFC. So yeah, so what are the principles of PSDI? So we're really looking to connect things that already exist and or support people that already have things. So we're looking at how to use data, how to use technology, and how to use people to sort of the best of their abilities. And that's sort of where this comes into with teaching our undergraduates, because our undergraduates are our next sort of generation of scientists. And actually, if we can start to work with them now and prepare them for sort of the more technological future than maybe than some of us had when we went through our teaching, they'll be in a much better place when they come out of their degrees than they would be without it. So what was the background motivation for us? As Samantha said at the beginning of the talk, just before COVID, we had a very large multi-million-pound refurbishment of our teaching labs at the university. And as part of that, they tried to phase out paper notes, and we got this lap-safe system, which was installed, which allowed every student in a given teaching class to have access to a standard hardware laptop. Now, COVID came along, as it did for all of us, and we went from a situation where they were sort of getting ready to go digital in the labs with notebooks. COVID happened, and they were forced digital overnight, but with not a massive plan of how this was going to look afterwards. So as things started to come back to universities and we opened up again, they were like, well, go and use OneNote in the labs, or go and use whatever note-taking software you want to use, but with no real structure or framework to it. So actually we end up in a situation where there was no paper notebooks, and there were no real digital notebooks either, and nobody was really taking notes properly, which seems to be a poor fit for the chemistry and the other physical sciences. So we ended up in a situation which wasn't great. So in 2024, I worked alongside our colleagues at the university to try and implement something with a bit more structure for them. So why OneNote? It's part of the Microsoft ecosystem, which means that all of our students have access to it innately, because everybody gets enrolled in that sense, which is really useful if you are familiar to the Microsoft suite. There is research out there that actually shows, and I think it's more so in the United States currently than it is in the UK, but you get schools that don't use Microsoft, they use the Google suite. And although there are similarities between the Google suite and the Microsoft suite, they are different. And that has caused issues. But hopefully it should be fairly similar to what most people have used, which makes it very easy to use rather than something off the shelf or very different. It can be set up as a piece of paper, so the students can do whatever they want with it. And it is a theoretically simple tool to use, give or take a little bit. But we need a teaching tool and not just a lab book. So actually having something that we could have a lot more control over in terms of what was there was really useful in that respect. So the last little bit of this talk is going to be about some of the survey work that I did with students to see how the first group that we sort of interacted with them and did this worked. So we did 3 surveys over the year, one at the beginning, one in the middle, one at the end. As you might be able to see, the response numbers dropped off significantly by the end. I'd say one of the greatest things I learned in this is don't try and survey first year students on the last couple of hours before they go on Christmas break. They don't want to interact with your surveys, so don't do that. We looked at a number of different questions, what they did previously in their note taking, what they currently use, what do they perceive as the technology that they are using, how they do their note taking in chemistry, but how they do their note taking elsewhere within the university, and then thoughts and feedback on the note taking itself within class. And then we were hopefully going to use those to funnel through into future developments, which we sort of have done, although we've taken it a slightly different track. So what were the good, the bad, and the considerations that came out of all of this? So let's start with the positives. So overall, we got really positive feedback from the students. Most of them engaged with it well. Most of them learned from it, and we had minimal broad problems. Our staff benefited greatly from this, especially through the integration of Blackboard, and it does work with other such softwares. This saved them a lot of admin time, because you can just set things up through Blackboard. It automatically pipes in students if students change courses or drop out. The staff themselves don't have to go through and administrate all of that. The Blackboard end and sort of the university IT structure does all that for them. We had the LabSafe system, which meant that all the students had access to the same hardware. Now, I think this is really important because it allows nobody is put an advantage or disadvantage based on their financial background, what they like to use operating system they use. Everybody is on the same basis. Everybody has, in theory, access to the same technology. And we're not taking laptops and other electronic devices in and out of the lab. So there's no contamination. First year students tend to live in halls. Their workspaces tend to be right next to their beds. Things like that. We are removing that from the equation. It's a really great teaching tool. It provides easy to use templates and structures. It clears up a lot of note-taking issues that it might come from using a pen. If your handwriting is a bit bad or you're in a rush, you scribble something down. I think we've all done it, or we've written something down, come back 2 days later and go, what on earth did we write? It removes all that from the structure, from the situation. You can bring in other data sources. You can take photos with your phones. You can take direct input outputs from lab equipment and files and drop those in there. You can use other Microsoft Suite files and actually have them display in OneNote. You can get quite a lot out of there. And it helps the students organize their notes and start to think about things that maybe they didn't think about at school when maybe they had a specific school book for one course. However, as with all these things, there are some negatives that we came across. The inbuilt equation editor in OneNote, especially the desktop version, doesn't exist in the other two versions, is naff for chemistry. It made life a lot more difficult. A lot of the students said they'd prefer it if it had a better chemical sort of structure and equation editor inbuilt. Linking into this, it is not a dedicated chemistry tool. So it has a lot of it lacks a lot of the chemistry specific elements. We use ChemDraw at our university for doing structures and stuff. There's no integration of that, so they have to go elsewhere, do their structures, and then pull them back into OneNote. We did try and help them with this, but it still breaks it up. It's not consistent. It's not all in one place. One of the biggest issues we came across is the fact that there are multiple versions of OneNote. You have the Microsoft desktop app, you have the Teams version, you have the web version, and you have the Android and iOS apps. They all have different functionalities. They all have different access routes. They don't sync together properly. As I mentioned above, the inbuilt equation editor only exists in the desktop version, so you can't use it if you've ended up on the web version or in the Teams version. And we had a number of data sync issues, and people used the Teams and web versions, even though we did ask students not to use those. Students also raised things like lack of exporting to other file types, formatting, and even questioning whether we were using the right tool for the job because they wanted to use something else. So these considerations are sort of things that were neither negative or positive, but the things that you might want to consider if you're looking to do this yourself. You need a good training plan. We definitely didn't do that in the first year of doing this. The students needed more support than we gave them. Think about not doing this in a lab environment and actually going through them in sort of a computer classroom or something like that. Make sure that you have good pathways for feedback so that you can catch issues. A number of the issues that students brought up to us were not really issues. We just didn't know they needed help with them, such as things like rotating images and exporting to PDF, both things that OneNote can do, but we didn't know they wanted that. How are your students interacting with the hardware? Lots of students would put them on the desk where the lab was going on, even though we have risers for laptops, unless the desks got really full because they just couldn't be bothered to move the risers into the right place for them. So what versions are there? And make sure that they're using the right versions of OneNote, which is probably some of the hardest things that we had to deal with. So a couple of acknowledgements to the PSDI team and to the lab team. There is a case study of this on the PSDI Zenodo site. So if you'd like to go and read that, you're more than welcome to. Thank you very much.
Amazing. Thank you, Philip.